Hey, all right, welcome back to Brighter Rays. We're looking at a study in Genesis 36, looking at this book of Edom, and it's been pretty interesting. There's been some names we see, some connections we've seen. We had to go to Deuteronomy last time to see what was going on with the land of Seir and why Edom is named that and why we have Esau there. And so we got all those kind of clues, and now we're going to be looking at the end here with the kings of Edom in verses 31 through 43. Now these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom. That's how it starts. And so you go through, you're going to see the kings who reigned in this place in Edom's kingdom, in Esau's kingdom. Not the kingdom that came before, remember, because that was all the people that lived there and they kicked them out. And so this is really the last section that begins with a list of the kings of Edom, followed by the list of the chiefs. And then that's the end. So there are a couple of things to notice about the list of kings. Notice that each one says that the king died, except for the last one. Now it's presumed that Hadar or Hadad, as he's called in another place in Chronicles, it's assuming that he was still alive at the time of writing. Since if you go to the parallel list in 1 Chronicles, which was written much later, obviously, that states that he died. And so it has the same basic list, but it says that Hadad or Hadar was dead. And so that little change there gives us the clues as to perhaps maybe this guy was still alive. That was the king that was alive when they went through. Maybe, maybe not. We're not 100% sure. But it is interesting that that note is made in 1 Chronicles. Also notice that the kingship was not passed from father to son, but rather chosen from among the people. So they didn't have like a royal family. It was just, well, obviously it's all one family. It's Esau's family, but it wasn't a progression like this person had a child and that child became king. No, it was someone chosen from amongst them that would become king. Now, the reason that Hadad, the son of Bedad, was king might very well be because he defeated Midian. It says that he defeated Midian and then he was king. So it might be because of his exploits in defeating the nation of Midian that they chose him to be king. I mean, we do kind of do that in the past with our presidents too. I mean, if you're a war hero or something like that, that would give you some credibility. So maybe that's what they did here. There's also a question as to why there is a list of kings, followed then by a list of chiefs. Does that mean that after the last king mentioned, Edom went back to tribal chief leadership, or were there chiefs at the same time as the kings? Can't be sure. It depends on the timing of this, and we don't have the timing of how long these kings were in power. So we don't know if it was rapid fire. We don't know if it was a long time. And so it has to do with the timing and how you kind of judge that out. So, I mean, maybe it was the kings and then chiefs were in power, or maybe those were the political leaders. Those were like the chiefs were the ones who were the military people too. And those are the ones who would go out and lead their certain families or their different tribes into battle. That could be too. Now, we can't be certain, but there is that kind of sense there where we've seen that with the other part of Edom, with the chiefs. And so if it's a political or military thing, then that makes sense. So you have the kings, you have this final list of the chiefs there. And if Hadad or Hadar was king at the time, then these would have been his chiefs under his power as king of Edom. So, but before we go, I want to go back to verse 31. Now, Moses states that these kings reigned in Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. Now, the implication is that the author knew that kings would reign over Israel. Remember that it would be many years after the death of Moses that a king would reign over Israel. So, what is going on here? Some people suggest that this was an addition made by later scribes after the Israeli monarchy began. That could be. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that Moses was assuming that there would be kings in Israel eventually. So he's saying, there are kings in Edom way before Israel will ever have a king. So if that's the case, if he's kind of just foreshadowing, which he does a lot in the book of Genesis, if he's pointing forward to kings that are coming, why would he do that? Does he know that there's going to be kings? Did God tell him there's going to be kings? Well, let's take a look at some clues. Clue number 1 is in chapter 35, where God told Jacob that kings shall come from your own body. Jacob was promised kings, so this alone would give just cause for Moses to believe in a future king of Israel, that there would be many kings of Israel. And so just by hearing what Jacob had said, or what God said to Jacob, and then Moses writing that down, he would have already known there's going to be kings in Israel. So that's clue number 1. Clue number 2 is in Deuteronomy 17. In verses 14 to the end of the chapter, God sets the laws for the kings. God prophesies in this passage that when they get in the land, they will say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. It is clear that Moses just had to trust what God said, that a king would reign over Israel in the future. That's all he had to do, and then he would have known that there was kings coming. So, that's my answer for that one. Why he's talking about before kings would reign. All he had to do was listen to what God said. And so that's the end of that study. Come back next time and we'll finish off our study for the week.